Have you ever noticed something strange? The average person spends most of their life trying to get out of debt. But some of the wealthiest people in the world seem to spend their entire lives taking on more debt. And somehow, they keep getting richer. At first, that sounds completely backwards. We've all been taught that debt is dangerous. That financial freedom means paying everything off. That owing money is a sign of financial weakness. Yet if you look closely, many wealthy families, investors, and business owners operate very differently. They buy assets. They borrow against those assets. And when they die, much of the tax bill disappears. In finance circles, this idea has a simple name. Buy, borrow, die. Now before you think this is some secret billionaire loophole that has nothing to do with ordinary people, stay with me. Because understanding this system reveals something much bigger. It explains why many hardworking people stay financially stuck for decades while others seem to build wealth almost effortlessly. Let's start with a familiar story. Imagine a 30-year-old software employee in Chicago, or a marketing professional in London. They earn the equivalent of around $70,000 per year. After taxes, healthcare, pension contributions, and other deductions, maybe they bring home around $4,000 per month. Not poor. Not rich. Just comfortably middle class. Every month, the money arrives. And every month, it disappears. Rent or mortgage. Car payments. Insurance. Student loans. Utilities. Groceries. Subscriptions. A few restaurant meals. Maybe a vacation payment spread across a credit card. Nothing outrageous. Nothing irresponsible. Just normal life. By the end of the month, maybe there's a few $100s left. Sometimes less. Sometimes nothing. Now here's the uncomfortable part. Most people think their problem is income. They believe if they earned another $20,000 or $30,000 per year, everything would be solved. But often that's not what's happening. Because as income rises, lifestyle rises too. A bigger apartment. A newer car. More expensive vacations. Better restaurants. Premium memberships. The financial pressure simply changes shape. And that's exactly how the system quietly keeps people dependent on future income. Think about a simple example. Let's say someone buys a $45,000 car. They put down a small deposit and finance the rest. The monthly payment looks manageable. Maybe $700 per month. That doesn't sound devastating. But over 5 years, that's more than $40,000 flowing out of their cash flow. And meanwhile, the car is losing value almost every day. The debt remains. The asset shrinks. The owner's net worth barely moves. Now compare that to how wealthy investors often think. When they spend money, they ask a different question. Not can I afford the monthly payment? But what happens to my net worth? Those are two completely different ways of looking at money. And that difference creates completely different outcomes. Most people focus on cash flow. Wealthy people focus on assets. The average person earns money from work, then spends it. The wealthy try to own things that produce value first. Businesses, real estate, stocks, private investments, assets that have a reasonable chance of growing over time. This is where buy, borrow, die begins. Step 1 is simple. Buy assets. Not because assets are exciting. Not because they're guaranteed. But because productive assets tend to appreciate over long periods. Let's imagine someone accumulates a portfolio worth $1 million. Maybe through decades of investing. Maybe through business ownership. Maybe through real estate. The exact path doesn't matter. What matters is that the asset exists. Now here's where most people assume the wealthy sell those assets when they need money. But often, they don't. Because selling creates taxes. Selling also means giving up future growth. Instead, many wealthy individuals borrow against their assets. Imagine a stock portfolio worth $1 million. A bank may be willing to lend a portion of that value. Perhaps $200,000. Perhaps more. The investor receives cash. But they haven't sold anything. The portfolio remains invested. If the portfolio grows faster than the borrowing cost, their net worth can continue increasing while they're spending borrowed money. To many people, this sounds crazy. Why take a loan when you already have money? The answer is psychological as much as mathematical. Most people see debt as a sign of lacking money. The wealthy often view debt as a financial tool. Not all debt. Not reckless debt. Not credit card debt. Not financing consumer purchases. But strategic debt attached to appreciating assets. Those are very different things. One debt funds consumption. The other debt is secured by ownership. And that distinction changes everything. Let's pause for a moment. Because this is where many viewers misunderstand the concept. Buy, borrow, die is not about pretending debt doesn't matter. It's not about borrowing endlessly to fund luxury lifestyles. And it's definitely not something most people can immediately copy. What makes the strategy work is the asset underneath. Without the asset, the borrowing becomes dangerous. With the asset, borrowing can become a way to access liquidity without triggering taxes. Now let's talk about the final part. D. It sounds dramatic, but it's actually a tax concept. In several countries, inherited assets may receive favorable tax treatment compared with assets that are sold during life. The details vary by country and tax law. But the general idea is simple. A wealthy person buys assets, borrows against them during life, avoids selling whenever possible, then passes the assets to heirs. The result can be significantly lower tax costs than repeatedly selling assets throughout life. Again, this isn't a magic trick. It's simply how certain financial systems are structured. And understanding that structure helps explain why wealth often compounds across generations. Meanwhile, many middle-class families experience the exact opposite pattern. Earn, spend, borrow, repay, repeat. The cycle consumes decades. Every raise is absorbed. Every bonus disappears. Every financial goal feels slightly out of reach. Not because they're lazy. Not because they're irresponsible. But because they're participating in a system that rewards asset ownership more than labor income. That's one of the most important realities in modern finance. Income helps you survive. Assets help you compound. And those are not the same thing. The psychological challenge is that consumption feels immediate.
À Nice car créate instant satisfaction.
A larger apartment feels rewarding today. An investment account feels boring. The reward is invisible. Sometimes for years. Human beings naturally prefer visible rewards over invisible ones. Which is why so many smart people struggle financially despite earning good salaries. They're not making mathematical mistakes. They're making psychological ones. They're optimizing for comfort in the present rather than ownership in the future. And that's understandable. Because almost every advertisement, social media post, and lifestyle message pushes in that direction. Spend now. Upgrade now. Enjoy now. Few people are encouraged to think about ownership. Yet ownership is often where long-term wealth originates. Not from extraordinary intelligence. Not from working 80-hour weeks. But from patiently accumulating productive assets over time. When you understand buy, borrow, die, the lesson isn't that you should start borrowing against investments tomorrow. The lesson is much simpler. The financial game most people are playing is fundamentally different from the one wealthy asset owners are playing. One game revolves around income. The other revolves around ownership. One depends on earning. The other increasingly depends on what is already owned. And once you see that distinction, many things in the economy start making more sense. The goal isn't to feel angry about it, or discouraged, or envious. The goal is awareness. Because awareness changes decisions. The next time you consider a financial choice, you might stop asking whether you can afford the payment, and start asking whether the decision increases ownership or decreases it. That single shift in perspective can be surprisingly powerful over a lifetime. And while buy, borrow, die may remain a strategy mostly used by wealthy asset owners, understanding the mindset behind it is valuable for everyone. Because wealth is often less about how much money passes through your hands, and more about how much ownership stays there. If you enjoyed this video, consider subscribing for more calm, reality-based insights on money, investing, and the financial systems that shape our lives. And thanks for watching.